inspirations, awakening to the joy of life.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Olga Davidson Awakening podcast. My today's guest is Marc Zimberg. He is an inspirational speaker, author of Stop, Smile, Breathe, Be book, and creator of the revolutionary program Access Points, the modern life meditation plan teaching people how to get out of their minds and experience the inner peace of meditation available in any moment. In this episode, we talked about the importance of breakdowns in life, the importance of self-care, and also about mind and soul liberation from suffering. Well, I'll stop spoiling right here and welcome Marc Zimberg. Enjoy this episode. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, it's so good to see you. Thank you for having me here.
Nice to see you. Thank you so much for coming here and being in our space. So excited to interview you today and ask you all of these questions about the awakening. And the
Awesome.
first question is a traditional one. If you ever had a moment of the awakening when your life was separated for before and after?
Good question. And first, I want to say that, I have a show called Awake Life, right, that we're about to do another season of. So this is obviously something I speak a lot on, which is why you have me here.
Yes.
And I feel like, first of all, one of my roles in this world is to kind of demystify this idea of what awakening is, because in some ways it can be such a genre of a spiritual click or idea of what that is, and then somebody else would have no clue what that is. But actually, if we pay attention right now, the word woke coming around, it's like if consciousness is evolving, then awakening is actually for everybody. We all snap out of dreams that we have at night. So it's time for all of us to snap out of it. So what I would call in my sharing an essential experience, really first profoundly happened for me in 1996, right? Years before, when I walked over hot coals and I was hospitalized and it was in a hell within a hell, I heard that clarity that I'm okay. It was kind of like hearing that inner God voice or knowing, but that wasn't really awakening, right? That was just the sense of, okay, that something's got my back and I'm okay and I can trust that, which is important too, of course. But in 1996 in Joshua Tree, that moment was when I first recognized that God is not some person or thing outside, not that God is inside or outside, but that God, oh my goodness, it's all of it. It's all of it. It's beyond, right? And of course, growing up in Judaism, they call that omnipotent, omnipresent, before, during, and after, is, has been, and always will be. But the context of us grasping that, which is ungraspable, doesn't happen. So, there's that joke, God created man in his image and we return the favor, right? So we put the attributes of our humanness upon consciousness. But that essential experience, many people I listen to the show have had that, where you're just like, oh, that's reality. It's all perfect. It's already okay. It's already connected. You're like, you're there, but you're not there. And it's all just so clear.
Wow.
So from that moment, 1996 on, that really never went away. You could say the mushrooms never wore off in a way, but it was, right? And it wasn't until actually being invited to direct inquiry after years of seeking and trying to get that feeling back, or have more of that feeling, or maintain that feeling, meditating 3 hours a day, reading book after book, workshop, and just seeking more of that enlightenment, right? Where I finally discovered a deeper experience of that, which is really just sitting and not following anything and recognizing that if we don't try to get to it, then there's something way more profound than just really our own being, our own presence. So that was an awakening to the Tao, or this totality. So, but initially, most people will have that essential experience, and then it's awakening. So it's not like it happens one time. That's what a misnomer in this community a lot is, that this was my awakening and now it's over, or I'm awake and then you move on. That's only the mind, ego, that would go, okay, this has happened for me and now this is what it means for me later. But actually awakening is fresh and right now. The ability for us to shift free from the paradigm of mind or survival or separation paradigm and actually be in reality. So when we recognize that reality, the question is like, how do we actually live that reality? you know?
Yes.
So yes, I've had that, and that was a life-changing moment. If you haven't had that in the audience, you're listening, I have people inquire into two things. One, have you ever had a moment in nature where you're just breath inspiring, awe inspiring, your breath was taken away and you're just like, you're in awe. You look at a big canyon or some beautiful sunset or something, just in that moment, you're experiencing that same thing. You may not connotate or saw it for what it was, but it's there. And it's also an orgasm for everybody too.
That's
And
amazing.
that moment of orgasm, right? It's not what our mind says before or after our performance or what we did. It's the actual moment. That moment, there's just, right? Everything
Yeah.
right there. So if that's here, it should be accessible all the time. And that's really what Access Points technology is about, is that we can actually train our mind and really access that all the time.
Mm. And the first time ever you've experienced that was when you were in hospital or when you took some medicine?
No, so the first time I experienced that clarity, that you know, up to that point, I think God was. I think when I was little, I saw God as like the army soldiers, like a big one, a big army soldier looking down, you know,
Mm-hmm.
right? But that moment where it was just connectivity was at the end, that come down of the mushrooms in Joshua Tree, and that led me to starting to write. And my mom's like, "You should read Deepak Chopra," and it just
Yeah.
you know opened up, and
Yeah.
that became my true heart's desire, was to discover that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I resonate with that a lot because I think the first time I've ever had this experience was after ayahuasca ceremony. And it was just like understanding of this oneness. And later, I got certification in yoga, and I studied a little bit of Hindu religion. And they talk about this Brahman God, which is everything, and they have different types of gods. They have individual God, which is Atman, which is consciousness within you, and they have Brahman, which is everything, which is beyond the universe, and which is so big that it can't even fit within our minds because it's bigger than our tiny mind. So yeah, this is really inspiring. And you're right, like the most important thing is to integrate that and to be able to get into that state on a daily basis through whatever works for you, meditation or reading or just going to nature. And this is really powerful to have access for that.
Yeah, I think to me, it's that's all true, but it's not. It's more than a state, right? Like states come and go. We can level up into different states, and there's lines of development, like Ken Wilber talks about. But the directness of consciousness, which is really you're conscious right now. So we don't have to look far for that. It's just being able to, unfledged by the mind's labeling, dissecting, problem solution, the idea of this me story that's constantly going on, free from that and free from the battle with our emotions. It's not that it's being out of body. Those can be experiences people have, but there's beyond a state. There's a directness of consciousness. And consciousness is expansive already. It's already limitless. If we really explore, we'll discover it's already right here, already connected to us, already at peace, and already limitless. So everything we're seeking for that we really would want in life is actually already here, right? So it seems like a state, and there is a frequency, and there's a raising of that state becoming more and more permanent, or as you kind of deepen in awakening. But people have tons of awakening experiences. Like for ayahuasca, I've had 15 journeys on ayahuasca. Ooh. And they've all been very profound in non-ordinary reality and a mystical way of life, which I don't talk often about because people get stuck on seeking that, like seeking the car, or seeking success, or seeking the relationship. But all of it's to still try to fill this void where something's off and something's not okay about me. So this idea of moving towards better is already saying at the ground, something's wrong with me. So yes, whatever is needed. Of course, nature supports us, meditation, all these things. And if we tell the truth, people have been meditating for hundreds and hundreds of years. And how many people have actually in their daily life can just live from that space? And so what I'm interested in is not just people awakening, but actually living an awake life and recognizing actually there's nothing you have to do to live that, actually, that there's a shift that you can become aware of. And it's not even, that shift is so slight, it's not even the word shift. The word shift is too big. But a direct noticing of my attention stuck in my thoughts, and my attention can be with awareness itself. That itself, and what we share in Access Points, is freedom, is meditation, is awakening, is life. that it is the only true reality and is our source. And if we come from this I am that I am, then we can naturally flow into what it is to be human, not based on the survival paradigm or the limitations of, the battle anymore. So
Absolutely.
meditation may work for you. Meditation may not be for you, right?
Mm.
Because you're a unique individual. Your unique DNA is you. But also the seeking to think that X, Y, and Z are going to be the things that get me more there or allow me to get in touch with that. Yeah, they get in touch with that. But then all of a sudden you get smacked by the mind and it's gone again. So then we have to jump on the wheel and seek it again. So it's actually in this idea that anything or condition is needed for freedom, where that paradigm of seeking and avoiding continues to maintain us really in a loop of some sort. Any kind of ceiling. When I'm working with high-level executives and entrepreneurs, I'm working with spiritual seekers or people who are really with some mental illness going on. It's some dynamic of seeking and avoiding, which is the flip side of the same coin,
Mm-hmm.
where suffering really is rooted. This is the root of suffering. The root of suffering is
Yeah.
that when my tension's with my mind, I'm in this do, have, be paradigm. So I have to do something to have something to be something, right? So do the right thing, have love from your parents, be happy. Do the right thing, have the right relationship, be loved. Do the right thing, have the right job, be successful. But being is actually first. So this isn't really,
Mm.
what I'm saying it's not really a state or a thing we can get to, is because it literally is already what's happening. Like everything that I'm saying, you who are listening, your synapses is firing, your cells communicating right now is all coming from the unknown, from being first. So it's just snapping to reality. Alignment is actually just coming to the way it's really happening, which is being and then into doing. So it's releasing and unlearning. We had to be conditioned. We had to believe ourselves separate. But the next evolution of being a human being is actually to let the mind finally be seen for what it is, an operating system, an organ, a powerful
Mhm.
one, but pales in comparison to the infinite intelligence of life, which we are directly sprouted from and connected to and created by and loved by and given by. And there's no other you and your unique DNA. So once we stop having to survive, we had to do that, right? Do you have children?
Not yet.
Okay, so like my children, right? If you have children, everyone, then like your parents get excited when you know your name, right? My son knew his name. Yeah, you know your name, right? You're Noah. So it's not like believing our thoughts and buying into the story of my mind's telling me in this narration, like I'm the lead in my movie, and that's always going on, and my tension's always there, and therefore, as science says, 90% of our thoughts are regurgitated, all from the past. 70% are negative. So where's that ceiling? Where's that same seeking, avoiding going on? Is some limitation based on a fear of that void. And
Mhm.
as long as we keep running from that, we'll keep just being identified as the survival animal. But we had to identify first to believe ourselves to be human, to develop our personalities, to be here in the world and see each other, or we couldn't be existing in separation. We would just be
Yeah.
like a baby, like a marshmallow, like floating around all the time. Right? But
Yeah.
now it's time to evolve. So what I mean by demystifying the idea of awakening is a lot of people have myths and ideas of what they think that looks like. You know,
Mhm.
it's going to be, I'm going to become a light body. I'm going to go to 5D. And then I have students coming in saying, I was in a quantum course and getting to 5D, but then my mind's like, I got more neurosis because I'm like, maybe I'm not going to make it to 5D. My kids might get lost, stay behind in 3D, which is the whole point, is that reality already loves you and everything is actually truly okay. So when the
Mhm.
ground of safety and okayness is served, then we stop operating in survival. We just don't know what
Mhm.
that looks like. Most human beings don't know what that looks like. Some people have tasted it, right? We've had moments of this recognition, but to actually finally stabilize in that, that's me almost like at the beginning, right? The
Mhm.
awakening is the beginning. And then since it's there's no end to this falling into ourselves, self-discovery, releasing, shedding layers of lies and paradigms in the past, not fighting against it, but finally just like taking stuff off and being like, yes, yes, yes to you and to life.
That's right. Yeah. We spend so much time living in future or in the past, but we forget about present and about where we are and about being grateful for being where we are. Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
And
For
I would
sure.
love to.
And if we
Yeah.
have to remind ourselves to be grateful, then it's still about the mind. So if you get what I'm pointing to, is that that's true. But if we're trying to be present, we're having to practice being grateful all the time. And if it doesn't work, and it works
That's true.
sometimes, then we're still in that same loop.
Mm.
So there's a way to actually start to receive our breath, to notice that inhale keeps returning. You just notice right now, if everyone just pauses for a moment, just notice. You don't have to close your eyes if you're driving, whatever you're doing. Does the inhale keep returning? Now the mind will just say, yeah, who cares? Blow it off. But you can actually just let your attention just notice the receiving of your breath. And if you really just drop into that and can tune in, and I ask you, does the body already have gratitude for receiving breath? And the mind could say yes or no, but forget what the mind says about it. Let that just be waves on top, and just notice your direct experience of this receiving, like life being given to you. Do you have to do anything to breathe? And it just keeps happening, doesn't it?
Mhm.
So in that, can you notice like in your chest here, like a gratitude already for the body of receiving?
Yeah.
And to me, that's this frequency of gratitude that we don't need to turn to mind. Mindfulness too. Mindfulness is great, but it's still about the mind. So, it's hard to talk about beyond the mind using words, as Lao Tzu says in the Tao Te Ching. I'm going to use words to describe the reality of nature, but since words are actually part of it, I can't use words to describe. Like it's a finite can't explain the infinite, but yet our direct experience can experience the infinite. So we can all know without a doubt, not just that it's an idea that we're all one, or I need to do this to meditate and feel gratitude. No, it's a direct, true nature of yourself. And when you recognize that, then you really get to discover the gift that you get to be you. So you'll hear me go to that because it's true. But I just want to see, especially in this culture, because your audience is obviously into this, has been experiencing this. So if we think awakening looks a certain way, then we're going to follow that myth. And we're going to seek that, right? If we still think it has to be based on if you get, stack your green drink and your mantra and your meditation and like you got to just get it all perfect and right. And if you think that's going to get you there, that's still a myth too. It's a much more of a surrender. And then a lot of you already know that, but then if you recognize, how do I surrender at this point? Like I've done so many surrenderings. That's how it was for me. I met fear so many times. I surrendered so many times. But I knew I had to let go more. And that was the discovery of self-inquiry, to turn attention to I am, to your direct experience, to start turning to your direct experience, not your mind, for what you are, what is next. And you start to notice how you turn to your mind for who am I, what I should do, what I should not do. Did I do good? Did I do bad? Should I do this? Should I not do that? We turn to our mind for the answer. So the mind will always know and fill the unknown. And that's what life really is the unknown. And from the unknown comes art, comes creation, comes all invention. So it's scary for the human just to stay at the edge of the unknown, that cliff, because the mind body, as much as it wants to protect its physical self, it's constantly protecting, this is who you are. You are this story. Believe it, believe it, believe it, believe it. Right?
Yeah.
But once we just see that that's what it's doing, and the 90% regurgitated, it's really got nothing to do with us. It's just a thought stream. Then we can know our own sovereign conscious self, like the idea that it's between you and God. And you start to really have boundaries. Like if you're an empath or you're a person who overserves others and sacrifices yourself, you stop doing that when you come to your own true core, the center of the storm. And you stop bleeding out onto others because you recognize your value, what you're here for. And that life is giving you life right now. So you're being created now. So then you recognize, oh, just being you is actually it. And if you really, that's a good idea. But once you can really like breathe that, right? You can know a rose smells delicious and want to smell it and get the aroma for a moment, but you're busy, or you could like just fall into the smell and it becomes just like one taste, doesn't it? One smell, right? Or you're eating like something good, like a nice big piece of sushi or something, right? Or a chocolate, right? You could just melt into that for a moment. It's just like kind of like one taste. It seems fleeting, but actually the shift is that's reality. So that's why I want to demystify the idea of it, because it's much simpler than a mind would ever make it. And it's not stacked with all the things that we think are spiritual necessarily, because it's all spiritual. It's all creation, right? And people have all different walks of religions going through Access Points process. That's why it's like a technology, because all of us have the right to come to ourselves, to come out of snap out of it, right? To come to our senses. And as we do that, then the war out there will come to its senses too. Like the only way my kids are going to live in a world that's going to be functional is to recognize it's not going to happen in the us and them division paradigm, separation paradigm. That's where the narcissism is the number one religion. Everyone's me, 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 me. Even the me that wants to help the world is still can't help but being self-centered on me until they recognize what it really is to be, cosmic centric or world centric at the very least.
Mm-hmm. This is so liberating. I love this idea. Thank you so much for sharing. And I would love to hear your story. How did you become a teacher, a coach? And I know that you were very successful as an actor in Hollywood. And then one day you just like completely decided to leave everything and completely change your path. How did it happen?
Yeah. So, I mean, I won't go into my long story. You guys can read in my book a little bit, and we can do another thing on that. But I was raised around self-help books everywhere. My parents were like self-help and diet junkies, right? Always going up and down in weight, and also how to grow. So Wayne Dyer books and neurolinguistic programming. They were some of the first people certified with Anthony Robbins. So I was already, back then we called him Anthony Robbins, but yes, Tony Robbins. Back in the day, it was Anthony Robbins, I think, in his early books. So yes, Tony Robbins. And yeah, so I had this belief system that I could do anything. And that was the lifestyle already, right? So that was my conditioning. Of course, in that was the needing to prove myself and feel like I'm okay, and the awkwardness, if you look back, all that occurring. But this overall mindset, right? People think mindset is important, and it's hugely important. But before mindset, even more important is actually your own freedom, right? So walked over hot coals at 18 years old, Anthony Robbins, and just kind of lost it. But I didn't lose it. I dropped everything, and I recognized, if I look back, what happened to me then, which is really important right now, okay? Because what's going on in the world, I'll come back to the story, but it's just an important thing to see, is that what's going on in the world with COVID, Me Too movement, right? I don't even want to call it Black Lives Matter because I think that organization was ridiculous, but the recognition of how horrible we've been to one colored skin, a race of people, and so on and so forth. And what goes on in this division and this whole thing that's happening is really the shadow coming up in our faces. And the Kabbalah sages say, where the greatest shadow rises, so does the greatest light. So if you're aware of any of this, then you're kind of that light, like you're responsible, like you're tagged, right? So with mental illness, and the reason so much anxiety and suicides up 200%, all this going on, is because we learn our entire life to like push this void down, right? That something's off. Like if you all look back when you're younger, there's moments where you felt like something is not right. Something's off about me or the world or my family. And that no one tells us to explore that. That's just pushed under the rug. That void, and we're told these are the bad emotions. It's all just pushed away. So the more we resist that and push this away, we push it away to run to the good, you could say, and to propel into separation. But at some point, that dam's going to break. And so that dam is finally breaking now. And until we can actually embrace the yin, the yang of ourselves, the dark and the light of ourselves, we won't know wholeness. Because wholeness is not an imbalance or something you get to. You're already whole. Life is already whole. The delusion is that it's not. The delusion is that there's someplace you need to get, do, or be different than where you are being and doing now. And it's not. So looking back on this was a spiritual awakening, actually, that happened to me then. It's just that there was nobody around, his team, my parents, or the way it was handled, to let me see that. I mean, I went over hot coals and it blew my mind like it's supposed to. So I was like, it's all there. It's all connected. It was like, oh my God, I have rapport with everybody, but still like in the scope of the thoughts, right? Going faster and faster. They called it a one-time break with reality. Pretty funny, right? A one-time break with reality. But actually that was the first break with reality, right? But I didn't know that then, right? It wasn't like I said, I came after, I won't go through the whole hospital thing. We'll tell that another time, but I got doped up and drugged up and put into a psych ward, and it was like a hell within a hell. And I'm sure every single one of you have had your hell already. And that's the whole point. Like enough is enough. When you start to see enough is enough, then you start to see that this next evolution isn't just about your spiritual practice, right? Just like taking care of your body or eating or your job or your work, your relationship has its practices and habits and growths to it. But to finally snap into reality is to recognize. So at the edge of this, so why is it anxiety and stuff up? Well, if you look at there, for me, I walked over those hot coals, and the idea of the identity of who I am got disturbed, got messed with.
Mhm.
11 years later, I did a landmark forum. So I didn't have another thing like that. They called it an episode for 11 years later. 11 years later, they're like, that doesn't make sense. If you're bipolar, but you're not bipolar, you only go up. Because my down was happy still. You don't go down. But it happened again. Why? Landmark forum made me question my identity. But nothing was there to help stabilize this releasing of that, actually. So in other words, what everyone's doing even now is you scramble to try to maintain your freedom, your happiness, your joy, your success. And with the mind trying to do it, you can never really maintain that. So it becomes like a scatter,
Mhm.
right? It becomes the storm, the chaos, the outside of the storm. But what's really going on at the edge of this unknown, that's where mental illness is. The mental illness in the shadow, even though it might feel like it's horrible, but it's actually for you, not against you. It means you're so close to the edge of the unknown that you're almost ready for another way.
Wow.
And of course, that's where people want to die and escape and run, but there really is no escape. So the ability to finally be with yourself and face that edge is to
Mhm.
face the fear of fear, fear of anger, fear of unworthiness that the ego's running from, which is like a dynamic. It had to run. It had to run from that to keep creating separation. But we don't need to keep running with the operating system of the animal anymore. We can stay in the fire. And once we have the ability to just stay at that edge, then there's this trauma and drama that wants to release. So those moments for me were actually spiritual awakenings, right? But I didn't know them as that, and I didn't live from that until the Joshua Tree moment, right? So it's so very important. So like I had these breakthroughs, and okay, I'm okay in the depths of that hell within the hell. I heard God say, "You're okay. You're going to get out of this, Brian. You're fine." I was rolling back and forth like in a fetal position, just saying I'm going to be okay. My dad came and got me out, and again, I went to college. Everything's fine. 11 years later, that happens again. But this time I go into UCLA hospital, and it was like camp. I got to play basketball and smoke cigarettes and do art. And I'm having this inner clarity that's going on that later on I'm balanced by all means. And other people are having mystical experiences around me also. So then it shows itself to be non-ordinary reality because I can't be crazy when 10 other people are involved here, you know?
Mhm.
And doctors have me on meds balanced. So we start to see that life really isn't what we think it is. But the point is, if someone had the ability to support me then I would have let go of the mind. And that's where we are now. So that's obviously, if you're any kind of suffering, recircling and cycling into sadness, or cycles into the negative thoughts, or cycles into the loop of downward spiral, into the depression, into I want to get out of here, it's because you're at this edge. And like, it's so scary to the body mind, it thinks it's going to die. Just as much of like if someone had a gun on you. But to the ego body mind at its root, it's as if people are standing all around you like a Quentin Tarantino movie, and everyone's got guns on you and they're about to fire. So we would be in high alert fear. That would be a normal response for the body to protect the body. That is really the root of where the ego body mind is always at. So it's got to constantly tell you you're okay, perpetuate it, figure it out, and go. Once we can let go of that, then we can just take the bullets and recognize that we're okay still. Or we can fall over the edge and then we recognize, oh, it's easier to fall than to try to hold on. Oh, and actually I'm falling and I'm supported. I got wind under my wings. I'm actually flying.
I
Right.
love it.
So that's what's really going on right now with mental illness. So even though it might seem dark and hard and like there's no way out and it's habitual and there's no end to it, and I'm telling you right now, you can quantum leap out of that. We do it in 8 weeks. You can quantum leap out of it. With access points, we've ended OCD, PTSD, severe depression, panic attacks, social anxiety, on and on. And that's just for people that have that going on. Just everyday stress, anxiety, overwhelm. The seeker of 30 years finally recognizing, oh, I can really, this is for real. I don't have to get to it more and make more of it. And entrepreneurs just busting through ceilings. But at the end of it, if you really get to be yourself, then you really get to create. And that's the joy of life, is this movement into giving life and giving good and giving creation, right? When it's not, we can still have had the past experience of bad, but we don't not constantly have to be reminded of the suffering in order to have the joy. We can feel the challenge. We can feel the strain. We can have resilience, but not have to suffer. So suffering can end like that 100%, you know, right? Like they'll say money back guarantee, you know,
Yeah.
like there's no question, like that's what's up for us. You know, that's what's up for us, is like for us to really transcend
the mind and the me finally put in its place. And then we can really start to play ball. Okay, AIDS, okay, cancer, okay, this, whatever's needed together. If we all had that mindset, we would take care of everything, wouldn't we?
Absolutely.
Right? We would take care of it all. So what happened to me in Hollywood, in Hollywood, I went, made a film, raised the money, wrote a script, had a second script, Leonardo DiCaprio's management company, people signing me. We were talk of town for a little bit. Then we win top 10 Toronto Film Festival. But in between that, I took the mushrooms. Okay. So I had that experience. And then I'm in the high of it. And I'm going to parties and people are screening our film and stuff. Didn't get bought yet. So everyone kind of went away. But then Toronto were top 10 in the film festival and everyone came back. So you start to see this facade kind of thing of like, everyone wanted to be our friend if I was about to sign a picture deal with Miramax and have 2 pictures, because then, yeah, they didn't do anything, right? Let me grab the hot new item before someone else does, kind of thing. And then maybe it's not happening, then back. So that contrasts to like, oh my God, everything's okay. It's all connected. I want to know about that. That was where it got to the point where I couldn't keep promoting me at that point. That's just where I was in my journey, you know? I mean, literally, as an actor, you have a head. Nothing wrong with being an actor, guys. I love that. I'll do it again one day. I love acting and I love the arts and I love all that. But at that point for me, it was like, I'm literally promoting a headshot of Brian. It's all about me, right? And that me was at that point kind of nauseating. So I wanted to really discover what was free of that me. And the joy of it is that you get to be you. That's the weirdness of it, is instead of me, instead of like, imagine you're just the narrator. Imagine there's like, take away the rest of the movie and there's just narration. It could be like a good audiobook for a little while. It's not the same as the full movie. Well, I'm living the full movie, right? So that shift was like, I just can't keep promoting me, and I have to know what this really is. I want to know, is this real or not real? Is it some bullshit or not? Is it just some trick of my mind or not? Right? All of it. I had to really see what is the mind? How does it keep my attention stuck in it? How does it work? How does it operate? And in 2002, I met a Gangaji, and she introduced me to Ramana Maharshi's self-inquiry. And so after all the seeking and letting go, it was finally letting attention shift to being with the weakness, being with your emotions, being with that fire. And then this chord, or this focal point, that me is this, my body. Me is this idea of myself. If we really investigate that I, you can't really touch that I. You can't really find the I. The I is always coupled with I am man, I am a woman, I am Brian, I am, right? So before that is freedom. And basically, it takes us finally willing to embrace ourselves and really choose to love ourselves. And many of you may think you know what loving yourself is at this point. But if you take a look, you're doing some technique or way or conversation with yourself to love yourself. And that's still more of the battle. Get rid of the negative thoughts with the positive. Feel on love. Tell yourself you are loved. Maybe that works for a little while. Self-care is important. Again, these are all stepping stones. I'm not against these things, everything in its right time and place. But if we're hooked on one thing being the thing, or if it's outer or a thought that has to produce freedom, it's not real freedom, right? So we're ready for that flip. So for me, leaving Hollywood was really saying, I took every workshop possible, everything I could to discover. I went into this 2-year mystical journey. And then after 2 years, I had this conversation in my head, we'll say conversation with God, conversation with the inner quiet voice, as people like to say in these circles. And there was this line that came out that my dad was like, okay, he's into Osho and Zen. I got to get him to his rabbi. He needs to be more Jewish. And I'm like, okay, I'll go talk to the rabbi, Dad, but I'm not needing to be anything other than I am right now. And I tell the rabbi this line, which we won't go into now. This would be like classes and classes on this line. It took me 2 years to understand this line, see it, but that there's a divine randomness, right? Just simply stated that they're like things are seemingly random, but it's divinely random. To novelty. Novelty is always what's new, right? What's that?
Synchronicity. That's how they also call it.
Yeah, synchronicities, the randomness that we think sometimes synchronicities are against us or for us are actually happening perfectly, right? Yeah. And then there's a divine randomness to novelty. Novelty is always like what's fresh, like the fad, the going fad, or what's new. The word novel, which Terence McKenna showed on his chart that every time there was a novel event, he mapped out novelty. And every time the Roman Empire, JFK, something that affected the collective on a larger worldwide way, like Corona just is right now, right? Then we went closer down to the 0 point of this novel, like some of the most novel events, right? So if that novelty, what's new, is like another explosion, another big bang in creation, divinely random. And all that is holding the pieces of the bridge together. The pieces of the bridge together are all physical matter, our bodies, us, right? That glue is expanding. It holds the pieces of the bridge together. The glue that expands, it holds the pieces of the bridge together. That glue is consciousness. That glue is God. That glue is already heaven. It's coming into heaven on earth in a way in time, but it's really beyond time. So it's already with us. It's already here. It's already as above, so below. And as we realize that, there's divine randomness to novelty that expands the glue, that holds the pieces of the bridge together. Your life is already held together, that allows the bliss to grow. In other words, God is expanding. Infinity is dimensionalizing. That makes no sense to the mind because it says infinity is already endless. What do you mean? But God itself is expanding, and its movement is towards goodness. It's also the creator of dark and light. So nothing bad is happening that's not part of consciousness. It's not allowed to happen. It didn't need to even happen to come to the next evolution of ourselves. If you didn't go through your down and your breakdowns, you wouldn't have your breakthroughs. Some of your richest experiences, if you really investigate and look in life, are the ones when you're down on yourself, when you hit rock bottom. What would that be for you, Olga? Where would be a rock bottom that you hit in your life that had you recognize a greater richness and depth of yourself in life? And maybe it didn't happen right away when you're down, but later on it became that.
Yeah, so the worst moment was when I just immigrated to United States by myself. I moved to New York with $200 in my pocket. I literally spoke any English. I didn't have papers, and I just had one friend, very loyal friend, and she had another $300. And she said, "Oh, great! Together we have $500. So let's go to New York. We're rich." So. And it was really, really hard. The first 3 years was the darkest period of my life. And it was a lot of people who were trying to take advantage of us because we didn't know anything about law, about any rules in this country. And yeah, that was really, really hard. But it's something which made me face reality and realize that like it's not all just pink. I kind of removed my pink glasses. That's what we say in Russian language, pink glasses. So they broke.
Rose-colored glasses, we say. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So the rose-colored glasses broke, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So I faced reality, and I just became more wise, more tough. And apparently, I helped all my family to move to United States. I immigrate them all, and now they happily live in United States, and it's much better than Transnistria, the country where I am from, the country which one doesn't even exist on the map. It's crazy story. It's something which completely made my life shift, and it's separated for before and after, for sure. So now I look back and I'm like, oh, I'm so grateful for this experience. It's the best thing ever happened to me.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And some people may not identify that, but we all get down on our knees at some point. We have our down, but if we take a look, what if these were all like seeds dropped? Right? Seeds drop to flower into the wisdom, to the life stream, to the nourishment, to the nutrients of really your self-expression, of you showing up in your life from your own DNA, from your own flow, from your own being, no longer having to run to survival. So if all that was seeds planted to really evolve to this next level of being a human being, to fully be in reality, which is now.
That's true. I once did exercise when you're supposed to write down 5 most significant events in your life, like good events, which made you to thrive, and 5 worst events. And then we had to do a little graph, like timeline, and order how they happened and how good they were. You would have to evaluate each of them from 0 till 10, and and you would have a graph like this. And I realized that after each dip, there was a way to go up. So every time I would go down, there would be a way up. And more I would go down, the higher I would go. The next event would be more transformative, which was amazing.
That's
and
right.
I realized that early. I did this exercise in my early 20s, and I still remember that. And it's something what I always
That's
refer
awesome.
to. Mm-hmm.
That's perfect. Exactly. You know, what you can start to see in it when you become more aware, more conscious, you already kind of know your ebbs and flows, right? You've lived through life and you know your downs and your ups. But if you're still battling the down, like that, this feeling shouldn't be here, get away, kicking it away, fighting it, trying to fix it, then there's no room for the ebb that moves into the flow, right? And like you just said, the more down, the more up, right? The more the tree's roots go into the soil, the more we can reach upward, right? Mm-hmm. So the immaturity that we have with all the emotions that we think are the bad ones, okay, now listen, there is trauma attached to that, trauma and drama from our past that the body literally doesn't want to experience those emotions too. So it is a physical thing also, but the mind has a meaning to all those emotions. So finally welcoming those emotions allows us to go in, God forbid, in the spiritual circles, to have a lower frequency. You know, if we're trying to only maintain upper frequency and there's no room for this other frequency, like why does that frequency exist? It'd be like, tell that part of the orchestra to shut up over there, please. You know, it's not needed. It's so quiet in the background, no one really cares about it. As opposed to, no, that is integral to the entire experience, right? So that's beautiful how you said it, right? So after a while, we become aware of our ebbs and flows. Now we can like have room for them. Now we can like be with it in a new way. We start to discover emotional intelligence. Really, we start to get to a guidance system. To be human is to experience all of our emotions. Mm-hmm. And as we start to welcome them all and not have to run, right? Freedom is not running from an emotion or being run by it. So if we're still running from that void, running from emotion, that's why these enlightened teachers sleep with their students and do messed up things, because they're not meeting their void. They're not telling the truth of that unknown edge, right? Mm-hmm. They're just off in, right? So we can make, the mind will always loop back and make it into something to separate it and divide it, right? But if we're true, if we stay true to being the sense that you are, I mean, it sounds so simple because it's only difficult to the mind, but it literally is the simple sense that you are. Not that idea, but the direct attention noticing of the sense that you are. Like right now, you can take a look. You don't need to do anything to be in this moment. A person's mind would say, well, yeah, I have to eat and I have to, okay, but just to exist in this moment, you don't have to do anything. Yeah. You don't have to keep telling the heart, beat, hey, heart, keep beating. Hey, heart, imagine if we had to monitor the heart beating all the time. And that's the same kind of fear that we're monitoring our lives with, and it's all mental. So to be emancipated from mental slavery, as Bob Marley said, or as this great sage Ramana Maharshi said, the only thing that stands between you and enlightenment is the idea that you're not enlightened. So he isn't just talking about the idea of enlightenment, he's talking about this whole perceptual field, thought field, concept, paradigm field of reality. That's the only thing that seems to stand between you and this freedom. But when you recognize that that is just really what it is, thoughts are just thoughts. They come and they go. It's just a radio playing. And it's based on the conditioning of the past. Emotions are actually just emotions. And they come and they go too. Mm-hmm. So then we can start to kind of whittle down and get to like, what is truly real for sure? What never changes? Right? They released a video on this today, I was saying, right? Not what never changes. We can start to recognize that everything else comes and goes, but there's something of you that is always here. Now that is trustworthy. You can bank on that. There's no fear to have in that because you know you're good. And that's that same goodness of God and life that is giving. So when we start to flow in the real movement of creation, then, so that to me, awakening is the beginning. And then it's about how do we move into this living, this awakening, right? How do we actually flow into from being into doing, this force of becoming, this big bang, this aliveness, right? And I think I'll hit on it since like, what was the question you had shared with me? What inspires you most about my work? Yeah. Well, A is that over and over again, we get results for people, right? Over and over and over again, like people are waking up like boom. Mm. And that was happening in 2002, a year after meeting Gangaji. And I had that realization of that me, I couldn't find it. And I met the weakness and there was no more surrender. And it was just like, oh, okay, I'm here. It's like, oh my God, it's true. It's real. And it doesn't go away. All right. Now what? Now what's life about? Well, having kids, coming down to earth, working a job, People are like, wait, you're that teacher guy. Hold on a minute. Can you show me why you're living like that in life? And so then I knew I'd come back to sharing this, and I had to. So about 5 years ago, my book came out. Was a bestseller on Amazon. It's changed people's lives simply just doing one access point: stop, smile, breathe, be, which is literally stopping, pausing, putting your attention to your smile, to your inhale, to your exhale. But it explains it even better in the book. Just doing that 6 to 10 times a day will transform your life, because finally you're starting to have space between you, mind, and conditioning. But the real key was really discovering the operating system of the mind, discovering these 5 main patterns in the mind. So I'm turned on by the last 2.5 years specifically, before Corona, in this digital way, sharing access points and then watching person after person go through it and have quantum breakthroughs and leaps. Was just like, you know, when I was working in hospitality or restaurants, I was going to sell you this great stone claw for a lot of money. It was like, I believed in the product because it might have been expensive, but it was huge, the biggest ones, and delicious, right? So of course, awakening and people coming to reality, where the idea of peace for yourself and peace on earth will come from, for my children, for your children, for the world, for us to really go to an age of abundance, is that. So I'm all in on that. Sounds like you are. Probably most of you listening are, but it's time for your suffering to end. It's time to take the lid off and really know yourself in a whole next way. So what I'm most excited about is really the force of becoming then. What I mean by that is that once we discover home, we discover the absolute, we discover I am, we discover our core is always still. But since that still is infinite and has always been, always will be, and is, it's sturdy to us as the separate human, which is here. If I'm not here, I couldn't be separate and talk to you. So my relationship to that infinite intelligence, creator, God, whatever you call it, right, is directly connected to that clearing. And in clarity, there's more clarity. So I can actually function and operate from that space. Once you have clarity, you trust yourself. And then he's in, as Tony Robbins says, there's certainty. So when we have certainty, we have a belief system, which is right, can't be crushed. And therefore, yes, thought, word, and action create. So these start becoming the dynamics of flow. But we have to first train free from the mind, have our own conscious sovereignty of our own being, and then be able to meet that edge of unknown. Right. So then we're at the spark of creation. We're at the fire and the flame, and it's intense. But the irony is, life is intense. Is life not huge and intense? Right. And that's what was hard for you when you went there to New York. It was overwhelming. It's a lot. Right. So if you feel overwhelmed, it's because life is that big and you weren't ready to be plugged in to that circuitry. Right. You weren't ready to have the 1,000% bam, but you are now. It's time. It's time for us to like really open our eyes and get grooving and being you. There's no mistake that you exist. If you're hearing this, like hear anything from anything I said, forget everything I said and just get this, that your existence itself, that you exist in itself is enough. And that in that all fulfillment and all treasure will be discovered. And that all of existence in this moment, like literally us right here talking in this moment now, like this, if this isn't this right now in this moment, then the rest of it isn't what it is right now too. So it's all together. It can't be, you could say, yeah, but you could die the next moment, or you could take it, but that'd be the next moment. And that moment would be perfectly that moment. But that's how much your intrinsic value in nature is. So what turns me on most right now is that it's step one is we can shift out of the mind. I mean, we train people out of the mind. It's a training, it's a technology now in 8 weeks. But then how do you live that? How do you meet the emotions and live from that and be you and get the gift of being you and juice into this world of abundance and flow? And, you know, I wouldn't teach this part of it until there's evolutionary human development is named my business, my company. And it was shown to me 15 years ago, really. First part, awakening, shifting free from it with self-inquiry and everything. And then coming into this creative flow and manifestation. Now, I had to see, okay, well, God, show me this vision is going to be true before I'm going to help show other people too, right? Like the fake guru that doesn't know how to actually live in, they're teaching others how to do it, you know, that kind of thing. So like, but now, you know, 3 years in, trusting the unknown, not knowing where money comes from, and it keeps coming, doors opening, you start to recognize that you don't got to kick down the doors that are closed. They're closed because they're closed. The right doors open. We're in this together for real. And when you can trust yourself in that way, oh, I cannot wait to see how you allow yourself to show up into the world. And if you just pay attention now, it's not necessarily about the next job that you do or the new career that you'll have. Those will sprout from here. But if the purpose of your life is you now, literally the purpose of your life is you now, as you start to notice that, you become more purposeful. Life becomes more full, more meaningful. And when you're that full, you overflow. And that overflowing may just be at the job you're at right now, but finally recognizing outside of the worry and concerns of what others think about you, what's right, wrong, good or bad, you can relate to the circumstances and others with the joy of being with them, with the joy that you get to be with them, that they get to be around you, that you maybe get that moment is that sacred. And it's not just saved for some sacred place somewhere else. Right. So I get people who've done ayahuasca 30 times, but yet they're still seeking and suffering too. Right. So anything can become the next, I think Joe Rogan says, right? Like addiction to drugs, like people can become addicted to a hamburger, right? We can become addicted to working out. We can become addicted to our spirituality, which by the way, sorry, but most people in spiritual genre are addicted to their spiritual search. They've identified as a seeker, and it's better than thinking that life was suffering and hard and one-sided and only about the physical. But then we start to take on the new identity of I'm spiritual and this is what it looks like. But the truth is, freedom's for all cliques, all genres, all humans, all religions. Freedom's for everybody. And we can never really speak it or capture it. It's coming home to your direct experience. So,
Thank you
that's
so
what
much.
turns me on now.
That's
I know that
so
was long-winded,
inspiring.
but you know, when I get rolling, I go.
I love it. Yeah. And you mentioned that self-care is really important. And how does your daily routine look like? And what's your number one daily self-care habit?
So to me, again, self-care comes first down to the root of directness, right? So the moment I awaken, I'm receiving that breath. The moment I awaken, there's actually a prayer in Judaism, which I only didn't recognize until years later, what it really is saying. And is that it's called Modeh Ani, but it's the thank you. My son says it in English now. Thank you, God, for putting my soul back in my body. Thank you, God, for being alive. Right. Which is great. To say those words is better than not to say them, everybody. Like to say, I'm grateful for my wife. I'm grateful for something that stimulates a nice frequency. Why? Because there's no lack or need in gratitude. But to wake up and yes, say that, but also to receive your breath, to start to recognize the gratitude in your own existence, that's always first. And that's not just first, that's really continual. But for sure, throughout the day, you can consciously be starting to align that, receive that frequency. Then self-care is telling the truth of who are you really? What is this one self? Who are you really? What is the self that needs to be taken care of? And maybe that self is already cared for. So then naturally from that space of where there's an innate self-love, power, caring, then we pay attention enough to take care of ourselves too. So like right now I'm working out again. I haven't worked out for years quite continuously physically. I'm doing P90X again, but I also know my ebbs and flows. I get in great shape, come back down. Now someone could say, well, that's a pattern, just rewire and fix it. But I don't pick up the whip to think that I should be somewhere different than I am. Also knowing that I'm moving towards a higher level of optimization. So now there's not whipping myself to work out. There's a pulling towards getting the body into this next level of my evolution, right? So self-care comes to paying attention to yourself. So your core self and then your outer self. So then of course, what you eat, taking the bath, knowing to take time alone for yourself. That's a big one. I was just talking to a client today. You may not think you have time. You may think there's so much going on. You have children, work, business, bills, all this stuff going on, your dreams, your aspirations, you're going after it all. Taking time for yourself in nature, like you were saying, right? Meditation, but just the act that you would take time for yourself. All of a sudden in that, we start to discover that there's way more time than we think, right? That there's way more time than we think. And as we take space for the things that really are our heart's desire, we start to discover, oh, there's room for all this other thought I had to do was part of the static. Yeah. And there's a director, clear way to quantum leap into the things and the fruitfulness of your life in the garden.
Yeah, all the noise disappears. Yes, absolutely.
That's right. You get to live you. You get to live you. I mean, isn't that good enough? Why is that not good enough? Only based on comparison. The dissecting is one of the patterns, right? So these 5 main patterns, you can read about in my book, Stop, Smile, Breathe, Be. But when these 5 main patterns, when we start to see them after with a couple thousand people, we started to see that, oh, once we just see these five main paradigms of how the mind keeps attention stuck there, we actually stop being identified with the mind. So you may have heard from Eckhart Tolle or great teachers that you're not your thoughts, but yet how do we actually cut the cord? How do we actually let go of ego identity, right? And that's really where Access Points, not just the shifting, but the seeing these patterns of this operating system allows us to literally let this mind be clear for what it is. We objectify the mind, therefore we are the awareness of that. Therefore, we can have to stay aware of the mind all the time. I'm watching my thoughts, I'm witnessing my thoughts, I'm being mindful. That's good, stepping stone, but we can just let the mind go. We can just not believe it anymore. Use it when you need to. You know, it'd be like walking around with that guitar behind you and have to always strum it every time you talk to everybody, all the time. You can never get away from it. You just have to always strum your guitar and talk.
I love it.
That'd be fun for a little while, and after a while, might not be fun. Like when you're don't want to go swimming or make love or do something like that. Probably wouldn't want your guitar on top of you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And please share with us about your book and about the Access Point program, and where can we find you? What is that about? And how our listeners can find you and your website, maybe Instagram.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you. You're awesome, you know, and that you took the time and the organization to care about your audience, and you took the time to actually find out about where, like my past, and you just like, hey, I want to interview this guy. Right? You actually took the time, and I can see that in the deliberateness of your questions and stuff. So I just want to tell you, I appreciate you, and that you're choosing to do this podcast on this topic means that you care. You're showing up for yourself. So after this, I look forward to us getting to know each other more and hearing about you and what's coming on in your life, so I can collaborate and support in that for you. So yes, Stop, Smile, Breathe, Be is one of the 5 main access points. These access points are ultimately done eyes open in your daily life, because it's not enough to go on retreat or on the yoga mat. It's not enough to go to the walk over the hot coal experience. We actually, in our daily life, need to discover that same moment in nature, that same moment of opening is actually everywhere, no matter how you're feeling or what's going on. So as we're shifting, and it takes less than 10 seconds to a minute, nobody sees that you're doing it, right? Meditation does not have to be, I have to sit down for 30 minutes. I have to put on, there's some great binaural beats. There's some great programs out there. Although a lot of people keep doing Headspace to try to like do the challenge and not get right. It's like, it's not quite it, and it can be helpful and supportive. But before you're walking in a meeting, the nerves are flying up and you're starting to buy into a loop. If maybe you got time for the 15-minute thing with the headphones before, you can't do it right when you're walking in. But self-awareness, self-consciousness, being able to snap to your core, that you can. So no one knows you're doing it. We're going to be doing these everywhere, 20 times a day. Each week you hone in on one, and you just start to discover the depth of how simple it is and all the things that the mind tries to make it be, the seeking of it, make it feel that way, get back to it. Am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? I'm not there. I'm them there. We start to see the nonsense of all that. And as we see that, we see this operating system, we start to really come to ourselves, right? So the book, Stop, Smile, Breathe, Be, is one of the access points, is one of the 5. It's the easiest one. My wife teaches it to kids. I have people doing it on stage. I have athletes doing it on the court. There's no one who does this 3 times in a row that won't experience a shift. So noticing that shift, deliberately discovering that shift, and deliberately recognizing, oh, I can tap in. I can tap in. I can tap in. And then all of a sudden the tap is just open. But once you realize the tap is open, you'll move beyond 50% being identified with the mind. You'll be more identified with that opening, with that clearing. Imagine what that would be like to just stay in that clearing. Now try to maintain it, stay in it, for it just to be stabilized. And then from there, now we can express and go. So how people can get a hold of me, the best way to, I got to tell you, luckily I'm getting so busy because we have some investors and people coming in. We have a couple other programs coming out because I really wanted to help 5 million people truly awaken in the next 4 or 5 years. That's, to me, is how this transformation is going to occur. It's already occurring. We have a technology that helps people quantum leap in it, no matter how deep they're in it. So I'm all in on that. So there are some openings. I'm going to be able to do this still. For the last few years, especially during Corona, I just opened my calendar, right? I was just like, you know what? I'm available to anybody who wants to book with me. Other people, you shouldn't do that. It doesn't give value to what you have to offer. You're too available for people. Well, but now I am getting so busy where I'm about to even stop taking on private clients because I already have too many, and my life can't just be hour to hour with individuals, right? So Access Point starts every week. You can come in But right now, back like in the old days, we meet each other and see if we want to work together. Right. So here I'm sharing because you're interviewing me, but it would be taking a look at Olga's journey, like we started to do a little bit there, and seeing your consciousness evolution. Where were these realizations or these openings? Where did you slide back in and get stuck? Where are you now that seems to be in the way? Because it only seems to be in the way. Nothing's really in the way. Right. They're veils. And once the veils are clear, then we see through. Right. So we come to our clarity. So I offer people clarity sessions right now at brianmark.com/private. That will still be with me now. At some point, there may be with other coaches as we're kind of growing this outward. But that is with me now. And eventually we'll have a button you can just click to purchase it. But I like to meet with people and see, make sure that we're in alignment. I'll refer you to somebody else if I don't think the work with me is right. And now there's a couple options. I have a program called Frequency, which is much more somebody who's already had this awakening experience and wants to really get into this creative principle and start to vibe in their frequency and their creation flow. That's a beta that I'm only doing with private people that I'm about to open up. So we'll see where people are at. We can see where they're on their journey, if there's clarity, and then if there's connection and alignment. I'll by all means invite you in. Eventually, anyone can jump in, but I want to be clear that we're clear together. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Yeah. So much, so much inspiration, so much wisdom. And I really feel your vibrations, how you are like ready to share that with the world. And like I can see that people change around you a lot. And thank you so much for doing that. That's amazing.
It's my pleasure. And then so brianmark.com is my website, brianmark.com/private for now. We can actually meet, have a clarity session. I actually give my time and space for some of the processes that are in my book, the Past Now Moment Exercise. And you can also, I'm on Instagram often. So if you DM me on Instagram, if you don't follow me, it's at Brian Marc Zimberg, BrianMarczimberg, at Brian Marc Zimberg. So you can always DM me there, and on Facebook, or email me at brian@brianmark.com. Okay, so that kind of covers those bases.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Olga.
you for your
I appreciate
time.
it.
And yeah, I can't wait to share that with our audience and to learn more about what you do and your book.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Olga. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.